Hey guys, Brock Layden here. Wanted to record this video today talking about what's called the Matthew effect. So in this video, I'm going to cover what the Matthew effect is, where the name comes from, how did it all originate, some examples of it in the real world, which are really fascinating, how it applies to consulting, Big Four consulting especially, and then going to go into as a somebody starting out the world, the Big Four or relatively junior, how you can take advantage of the Matthew effect, or at least make sure that you're not being hampered by it. And then I also want to talk about, for any leaders who are watching, because this is something that I've been thinking about myself, how you can ensure that you're not falling victim to the Matthew effect and running your business in a way or your team in a way which is suboptimal from a developing talent perspective. So anyway, what is the Matthew effect? So I learned about the Matthew effect from this amazing book, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And you can see from the subtitle there, the story of success. And what Malcolm Gladwell essentially talks about in the book is, everyone knows the stories of people who worked really hard and made it to the top of their field, whatever that was, whatever that field is, sorry. And Malcolm Gladwell doesn't necessarily discredit that. He talks throughout the book about how, working hard is absolutely an important and necessary component of making it, to the top in any field. But in this book, he talks about what are all the other factors that play a role that people don't necessarily talk about. Because once you know those factors, then you can plan for them, whether you need to exploit them for your advantage or whether you need to minimize them, make sure that they don't hurt you, or whether you're trying to build a system to make sure that these things do or don't happen. But you can't do that unless you know what these things are, right? So that's one thing I want to cover today, the Matthew effect. It's the first chapter of this book. So even if you can't be bothered getting through the whole thing, the first chapter when I read it absolutely blew my mind. But anyway, so what is the Matthew effect? The Matthew effect comes from a relatively well-known Bible passage. And I'm not going to try and read the Bible passage because it's one of those ones where you read it in today's language and you're like, what does that even mean? But if you've heard words along the lines of, to he or to they who have, all shall be given, to they who have not, all shall be taken. It's essentially that passage. And if I pull up, I've gotten a little bit artistic for today's video. A diagram. So I pull up this diagram. And if we say that this axis is skill, let's say, and this axis is time, the Matthew effect describes how early opportunities lead to greater and greater opportunities and greater advantages. So advantages bring about more advantages. So if you can get some advantages, get some wins, that brings you on the path of getting more and more advantages. Let me explain it with a really interesting example that comes from Canadian hockey. If you look at any elite Canadian hockey team and you look at the dates of birth, date of births of the people on that elite team, what you'll see is an unequal distribution of the months that those people are born in. So at the time that Malcolm Gladwell wrote that book, the numbers were as follows. So people born in the first quarter of the year, January to March, made up 40% of elite hockey players in Canada. The second quarter was 30%. The third quarter was 20%. And quarter four, only 10% of elite players were born, in October, November, December. Now that's really strange because you would expect that, the month that you're born in doesn't really impact how good you are at hockey. And that therefore there should be, roughly 25% of elite hockey players falling within each quarter of the year. But it's not like that. Why? Well, part of what influences it is this idea of the Matthew effect. So if we start right down at the bottom here and imagine that you've got, a team of like 10-year-olds playing hockey in Canada. And at the age of 10, there's not a massive gap between the best and the worst. Clearly, you're going to know who the upper echelon are and who are the duds who are never going to make it, right? But there's not that much of a difference in ability. And at that age, a portion of the difference in ability is actually not necessarily ability, but it's in how physically developed the children are. And imagine a child born in January of that year versus a child who was born in December of their birth year. Now, obviously, there's going to be outliers, and not every child born in January is going to be bigger and stronger than the children born in December. But on average, they will be, because they've had an extra 11 months to grow, develop, and all that sort of thing, right? So in the early ages and under 10s, what you'll see is disproportionately the children born earlier in the year are the better performers, simply for the fact that they are slightly older, they are more developed, which when you're dealing with those young ages, 11 months, 6 months actually makes a difference. But then what's this dotted line? Well, this dotted line is the first opportunity that comes about. And let's say in the case of Canadian hockey, it's, these children who are playing in their local team have the opportunity to get picked for a regional team, a representative team. Now, if you're running the representative team, what are you going to pick? You're going to pick the best kids from the local league, right? Because you want your team to be the best possible. Now, based on what we just discussed, who are the best kids going to be on average? They're going to be the ones who were born earlier in the birth year because they're bigger and stronger. And whether you realize it or not, in fact, nobody would realize that. No one's intentionally picking for kids who were born in January rather than December. But what ends up happening is that the kids born in January are bigger, stronger, they perform better, they play better because they have that advantage, and they get picked for the regional team. This line here. And what happens when you're a 10-year-old, 11, whatever it is, you're playing hockey, you get picked for a regional team? Well, now you've got another team that you're playing for, so you're probably training more. You might be training an extra 1 or 2 nights a week, so you're training with your local team and your regional team. And then because now you're playing at the regional level, the regional team has access to more resources because they're a higher level. So there might be better coaches that are coaching you. So now you're getting, greater access to expertise so you can learn and develop quicker. You're also playing with and against people who are of a higher quality. So you're being challenged and pushed harder and harder. And so what ends up happening? You become this top line and you grow and you grow and you grow because you have this opportunity that enables you to develop at a faster rate than your peer who was born in December and maybe only slightly worse than you. And the only reason they were slightly worse than you is because they were a little bit younger and hadn't grown into their body yet, and they don't get that opportunity. So they follow this line here. They're still developing, but they haven't had the same opportunity that you've had to, get better coaches, play against better people, train more, and that sort of thing. And you could keep drawing, the vertical dotted lines as we go because, sure, there's an advantage when you get selected for the regional team, but then perhaps you get selected for the state team after that. And at the state team, you're starting to get, former pro hockey players who are your coaches and getting access to that. And then you can go to the national team and so on and so forth. So the Matthew effect describes how one small opportunity at the start or one slight difference, the month that you're born in, leads to you getting an opportunity that somebody else doesn't get. And that opportunity leads to you going on a completely different trajectory because as you get that first opportunity, you get another opportunity because, when they're picking the state team, they're not going to pick the kid who is down here. They're going to pick from the kids who are up here who have been in the regional team. So you get access to that opportunity and then you get access to more and more opportunities. The same thing also happens when it comes to children like going into primary school with like subjects like math as an example. So if you have a child born in certain months of the year, like I don't know, I'm not a parent, but it might be like December or something like that. You, within some range, get the choice of whether you almost want your kid to be the oldest of their year, like start school late so that they're the oldest, or start school early so that they're the youngest of their year. And if you're following the Matthew effect, you want your child to be the oldest when they're going into school, the oldest they possibly can be. Why is that? Because imagine you got a child, you got a room full of children in prep or grade 1 or whatever, and they're going into math class. And now I remember when I was in primary school, at least the way they did it at my primary school was you did math class and everyone, there were 3 groups from, top to bottom, and everyone got split into those groups. And if you're in the top group, you got the hardest math questions. If you're in the middle group, you got the intermediate ones. If you're at the bottom, you got the easier math questions, right? It's all varied based on your ability. Now, when you do that initial split, what you'll find is that students who are born at the start of the year, so slightly older, are disproportionately represented in the, in my example, the middle and the top tier of the math groups. And the inverse is true for students born later in the year. In December, what have you, in the final quarter, they are disproportionately represented in the middle and bottom math groups. Now, why does that matter? That's kind of that first separation, this line here. Well, if you're the student who is in the top group, you are doing the harder questions. You're getting pushed harder. You have to study harder. You're learning more complex things. And in your group, there are also other students who are smarter, and they are pushing themselves as well. And so because you're pushing yourself more, you're getting harder questions, you start to go on this path up here. And someone else who gets put in the middle or the bottom group is doing easier questions. They're not developing as much, and they follow this trajectory here. And the other powerful thing of that as well, the other powerful component of it, is the power of identity. When you're a child, you get put in the bottom group for maths, you're probably, all things being considered, not going to be that into maths because you're being told that, you're not good at it, you're in the bottom group. So that's going to hurt you even more. And on the inverse, you get put in the top group of maths, suddenly you maybe start to take a bit of pride in your math ability. You think you're good at it, you enjoy it a bit more. And so that early decision there about what group you get put in for math, which is largely based on, what month you were born in, or influenced by, I should say, what month you were born in, leads to 2 totally different trajectories based off something simple like that. You get the early opportunity, and the opportunity brings more and more opportunities. To those who have, more shall be given. To those who have not, all shall be taken. So that's at a high level what the Matthew effect is, 2 examples of it. Now, how does it play out in consulting? The key way that it plays out in consulting, and I'll bring this back again, is you join the Big Four world, you have a cohort of fellow graduates who are starting with you. Same applies for, senior cons, whatever else, but let's just take the graduate example. And you're all relatively similar in your capability. Then the first opportunity comes. The opportunity is, let's say, an engagement, a project. And let's say there's 5 graduates in your team, and there are spots for, let's just say there's 2 grads in your team to make it simple, and there's a spot for only one of the grads on this project. The grad who gets to go on that project gets all the benefit of the experience of being on that project, learning how it operates, getting experience. How do we do this? What reports do we make? How do we do them? You're gaining those skills. That grad is also building a network of people who are on the project and on the client side potentially. And they're getting the opportunity to build a personal brand. The grad who doesn't get picked for that project doesn't get those in the same effect. So what ends up happening is that first decision point about which grad gets selected. Then further down the line, the grad who gets chosen is learning more. They're becoming more and more capable. Then the second project rolls around. Imagine there's another dotted line here. The second project rolls around. Who do you think gets picked for the second project? If you're a leader, you're probably going to pick the grad who has experience, who's done this before, albeit they have very little experience. They're still a grad, but if you have a choice between someone who's at least done this thing once before versus somebody who hasn't done it at all, you're going to pick the person who's done it once before. So then what happens? That graduate gets a second opportunity, and they continue to go on this trajectory. Meanwhile, the first grad hasn't even had their first project yet, and it just keeps going and going and going. And it's not the fault of either grad that this happens. And you could argue and make a very strong case that it's not fair. In a fair world, grad 1 gets the first project, sure, because someone has to get it, but then grad 2 gets the next project. And that's how a fair world would operate. I am not a fan of relying on fairness when it comes to my own life. So I don't want to come across like saying, life isn't fair, get over it. It's not, maybe that's my perspective, I don't know, but I personally don't want to rely on fairness or luck when it comes to my life, because that's very disempowering. I can't control that. I can't control whether things are fair or not. What I can control, though, is understanding the way that human nature operates, the way that the world around me operates, and trying to put myself in positions where I'm not being disadvantaged by things like this. So the question becomes, how do you make sure that you are that grad, that con, that senior con, selected for that project? Because once you get on that project, you get the experience, and then you're in the box seat to be on the second project and the third project. And in fact, there was just one quote that I wanted to read from Malcolm Gladwell that I think sums it up well, the point I'm trying to make around what the Matthew effect is. He says, "It is those who are successful, in other words, who are most likely to be given the kinds of special opportunities that lead to further success." So the reason it's important to land on that first project is because, like I've been saying, that gives you the opportunity to learn, to grow, to build a network, and to build a personal brand, so that when the next opportunity comes, leaders know what you're capable of delivering, what you're about. They'll go, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll give it to Brock. He did this last time, yada, yada," even though there's another grad sitting there who hasn't had that chance to prove themselves yet. Now, how do you put yourself in the best position to get that first opportunity or that second opportunity, any opportunity? And for me, it's very easy when you join as a grad, again, consultant, whatever, to be, I don't know what the right word is, like disheartened, or kind of think that the work that you're doing at the start is kind of meaningless, right? Because you might join as a grad, and for the first, I don't know, month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is, the work that you're doing is like formatting decks for directors, or you might be reviewing Word documents. You might be sitting in meetings and taking minutes. And that work is like not thrilling, right? Nobody joins, Big Four, goes into a career hoping that what they're going to spend their days doing is formatting decks and writing minutes and that sort of thing. But I think the key thing for a grad, like one of the key messages I want to get across, is those shitty tasks that you're doing at the start, they are your opportunity in that really early part before the dotted line to put yourself up, to build your brand. We've got those two lines there. There's a slight difference between them. All it takes is a slight edge to get picked for that first engagement, that second engagement, whatever it is. And those shitty tasks that you get asked to do are your opportunity to show what you're capable of, right? And you go, "Oh, it's just formatting decks, it's whatever." But you would be amazed the spectrum of capability, let's say, when it comes to a simple task like formatting a deck, in terms of like the effort that a grad will put into it. It's not hard to see whether they put effort into it or not. The enthusiasm, right? So if you're a leader giving somebody like a graduate work, like a task to do, one of the best things that comes back is a sense of enthusiasm for that work. Because the director or the manager, whoever it is that's giving you that task, they know that it's not riveting, they know it's not exciting, and deep down, they probably kind of feel like a bit bad that they're asking you to do that work. I think it's a big reason why a lot of managers continue to do those shitty jobs themselves, because they don't feel good giving it to the grads or the cons below them. So if you're a grad or a con and you can take that work and actually have a real positive attitude about it and show some enthusiasm for it, it's going to make that person feel a lot better about giving it. They're not going to feel bad anymore if they did feel bad in the first place. Let's say, a slight amount of guilt. It's your opportunity to show, what you're like to work with. Are you friendly, funny, you got personality, bring a bit of color to the team, whatever it is. Are you a good communicator? You keep them updated on the status of the work, because you do those simple things well. If I give you a deck to format and I say I need that by, I don't know, today's Monday, I need it by Wednesday. And you message me at the end of day Monday giving me an update on where you're at. You say, hey, Brock, I am, out of the 10 slides, I've done 3 of them. I'm aiming to get through 5 tomorrow. And then in the morning on Wednesday, I'm going to do the final couple, and then I'm going to review it myself, and then I'm going to hand it to you at 3 p.m. Boom. If you do that for me, I'm going to sit there and think, wow, like the work itself is nothing special. It's formatting a deck, but the way that this grad is doing the work really stands out to me. And so when I've got a job that I'm running that I need to staff, and I've got to, there's a spot there for a grad, who am I going to pick? I'm going to pick you because you did that work and you did it to a high quality. On the inverse, if I give you that deck to format and you have a shitty attitude about it and you don't want to do it, like, fair enough, because I get it, because I don't want to do that deck either. That's why I'm giving it to you. So it's not that that's the wrong reaction to have, but that's not an effective reaction for you to have if you want to graduate from no longer doing those decks. Because if you do that to me, then when I do get that opportunity for a project, I'm going to go pick some other grads. I'm not going to want to deal with you. I'm going to resent the fact that you reacted to me that way when I asked you to do that deck. So you're not going to get the next opportunity, and you're not going to follow that line because you're not going to get this dotted line first. Someone else will. And so those shitty tasks that you do at the start, they matter. They matter because you have to do those first to then build the trust and the personal brand that enables you to do the tasks above you. Because when you start out, in fact, almost no matter what level you're at, let's just say for grads and cons, the work that you're doing is basically determined more or less by the people above you on the hierarchy. It's dependent on them to give you opportunities. So at first, they're going to test you out, give you some simple things to do, formatting decks, Word documents, whatever it is. Then once they see that you're capable of that and you're nice to work with and you're good all around, they'll give you something slightly better, slightly bigger, slightly bigger, slightly better. And that's how you become responsible for more and more things. You start with what you know, and then you let what you know grow. You keep going up and up and up, building a personal brand and doing all those good things. But it starts with the jobs that you don't want to do at the start, doing them really well. And if you're not even getting jobs at the start, let's say that you might be thinking, oh, that's all well and good, Brock, but I'm not even getting given decks to format. Go find something else to do. Just look around your team and find something that you can do. Does your team have a monthly meeting where, it's hosted by a different person each month? Because if so, I'm almost willing to bet you nobody wants to do that job of being the host. Someone probably gets voluntold that they're doing it. Put your hand up and be the host. Wow, what great initiative, is that? The senior leaders look at that and they go, wow, who's this kid like putting his hand up or putting her hand up to run the monthly meeting? That's special. And then you take something off someone else's plate. Or you might see, a problem in the onboarding process in your team. Might be when you joined, you found it really hard to find all the different links that you needed to access on the intranet. I don't know. What's to stop you from being the person who compiles all of those links into an easy-to-read document so that next time somebody joins, whether they're a grad or a director, they know how to find all those things? There are opportunities for you to find pockets that you can kind of wedge yourself into and do work, even if someone above you is not going to give you the decks to format. And perhaps doing those things like hosting the meeting and doing the onboarding, instructions, maybe they're better than formatting decks anyway. So plant the seed in your own mind to figure out what are those things that you can do really well, which are going to enable you to build a brand, build trust, build relationships, that next time the opportunity comes, they think of you first. I mean, another dimension to that as well is like from a personal relationship perspective. I mean, I know it's a hot topic in terms of like in-office attendance and that sort of thing. But one simple thing that you can do to give yourself an advantage is be around people physically. If you are around, if the managers are, directors in your team go into the office on a Monday or a Tuesday or whatever it is, one simple thing you could do is go in on that day as well. Because again, if they've got one spot on a project and they have to pick, all other things being equal, between somebody who sits next to them in the office who they've had a couple brief conversations with versus somebody who they've never even met before, they'll pick the person that they have sat next to and kind of know. And even virtually, you can do it with virtual coffee catch-ups, whatever it is. But you just got to do these initial, simple, seemingly meaningless, seemingly innocuous things well, because those slight advantages at the start, again, come back to the Matthew effect. The seemingly small advantages at the start lead to more advantages and opportunities. And then they lead to more opportunities. And then, I should have drawn more dotted lines on this, I'm now realizing. But lead to more opportunities, lead to more opportunities, lead to more opportunities. And it becomes a flywheel. And I wanted to talk about what a flywheel is because it fits in perfectly with the Matthew effect. And if you'll just humor me picking up another book, the concept of a flywheel was written about by Jim Collins in this book, Good to Great. And the TLDR of this book is essentially this guy, Jim Collins, ran a study to try and figure out why is it that some companies go from good to great? Check, creative name there. And why do some go from good to no longer existing? And one of the things that he talks about in the book is what's called a flywheel. And essentially what a flywheel describes is how parts of a process, bear with me here, parts of a process kind of feed each other in a beautiful virtuous cycle so that when things go well, they continue to go well and continue to build. I'll describe it in terms of Amazon. I just recently read a book about Amazon, and one of the things that they talk about is how Jeff Bezos actually read that book, Good to Great, and he loved the flywheel concept and he wanted to apply it to Amazon. Now, I can't remember what year it was that Bezos did this. It was sometime in the early days of Amazon. And I think the story goes that he drew it out like on the back of a napkin. I feel like so many great Silicon Valley stories start, on the back of a napkin in a restaurant. And what he drew was this diagram here. And this is the Amazon version of a flywheel. So in the middle, there's growth. Growth is what Jeff Bezos wanted, essentially. Now you can see there's an arrow that comes out of growth and it points to lower cost structure. So as Amazon grows, they are enabled, let's say, to have a lower cost structure. They're doing more volume, their cost per item decreases. As their cost structure lowers, that enables them to lower prices, which is the next arrow. As they lower prices, the next arrow, it enables them to improve the customer experience, because who doesn't love lower prices? Better customer experience leads to more traffic to Amazon. More traffic leads to more sellers wanting to be on the website because all the traffic is there. More sellers leads to there being a greater selection for customers because there's more sellers on there now. And then more selection, again, improves the customer experience, and it goes round and round and round. And the idea is that it basically becomes a flywheel. It becomes a snowball. It just keeps building and building and building. And the reason I show that is because I think essentially the Matthew effect ties in really well with that. And when you take the first few opportunities and you do them well, you yourself in the world of Big Four consulting can build your own flywheel, your own snowball effect. Now I've drawn a very simple one here, and you can draw one, figure out what your own flywheel is. But here's an example, a simple example. You get an opportunity, all right? And we're trying to be successful here. I mean, success, you can unpack what is success, but just bear with me in terms of the simplistic answer being you want to climb the ladder, you want to get promoted, you want to get paid more. You get an opportunity. That opportunity enables you to deliver quality, right? You have the opportunity to do something on an engagement, let's say, or you have the opportunity to fix, an onboarding deck, whatever it is. You deliver quality. The quality that you deliver helps you build your personal brand, aka reputation, aka what do people think about you? When your name comes up in a conversation, what do people say when you're not in the room? Is it good? Is it bad? Your personal brand enables you to get more opportunities. You get opportunities, you deliver quality. You deliver quality, the brand improves. The brand brings more opportunity, and it builds and builds and builds. And this is what happens in the Matthew effect. It builds and it builds and it builds, and you get more and more opportunities. And it starts just with the early differentiation, getting the first opportunity, nailing it, and then you continue to nail more and more opportunities. And again, I said something in the last video about how when you talk about these things, it can sound manipulative and like you're trying to, beat the game or trick people or anything. But fundamentally, it doesn't work unless, coming back to this flywheel, you deliver quality. It comes back to that. You can have all the techniques, you can play all the Machiavellian games that you want to play, but if you're not delivering quality and actually doing a good job at the end of the day, it'll be temporary, and maybe it'll work for you in the early days, but people will figure out that you're a schmoozer or that you're just a kiss ass or whatever it is, and it won't bode well for you in the long term. And even if you're like, oh, I'm just starting out in Big Four consulting, I don't want to stay there. Yeah, I'll just like play the game for a few years and try to hide the fact that I can't actually do work and then I'll bounce. Fair enough, maybe try and go do that, but people talk, and your reputation you may be surprised by how much it follows you. So I just want to say that, because when you talk about these sorts of things, like I said, it can come across manipulative, like you're trying to play games, but fundamentally you need to do good work. And it's as simple as that. If you don't do that, then your opportunities aren't going to keep coming. Once you've done with those initial ones. So that's kind of like from a junior perspective. You want to nail your early opportunities because they will give you more and more opportunities. The boring work, do it well. If you want to stop doing boring work, the quickest way you can get out of the boring work is to nail it and do it really well and take pride in it, because then they're not going to want to waste your time and your talents on the boring work. They're going to want you doing, greater and greater things. So maybe think of it that way. Even if you hate the work that you're doing initially, the quickest way to get out of it and to be successful in the process is to nail it and take pride in formatting the best decks that your firm has ever seen, or being the most on top of it grad that the firm has ever seen. Whatever it is, just nail it. Now, I also wanted to talk about this from a manager's perspective or a leader's perspective, because like I mentioned earlier, the Matthew effect describes something which really isn't fair. Because take the example of two grads. One grad gets the first project. Then when the second project comes, it goes to that grad because they've got experience now and they're going to be better at it. And then the third project goes to that same grad. And then you've got the other grad sitting there waiting for their first opportunity. That's not fair. In a fair world, it would go 1, 1, 2, 2, and that sort of thing. But again, understanding there's a difference between what's fair and the way that the world actually works, right? And like I said before, I prefer to run my life not assuming that it's going to be fair or that people are going to play nice. I prefer to understand human nature, human behavior, and optimize according to that. Now, having said that, what I want to talk about now is why ultimately a leader or a manager has the power to not let the Matthew effect take hold of your junior cohort. And I want to make the case not that a leader should prevent the Matthew effect because it's the fair thing to do or because it's the right thing to do, because again, I'm not interested in relying on people being fair. I'd rather put forward an argument as to why it's beneficial for you as a leader that you don't enable the Matthew effect to take hold. And there's one interesting case study that was done recently. It's a really unfortunate event that happened at Ernst & Young EY in the US. I think it was 1 or 2 years ago now. And just a tragedy. And it led to a cultural review being done there by a third-party consulting firm. And they did this wide-ranging culture review trying to essentially figure out, what's the culture like at EY? Actually, I can't even recall now, sorry, if it was in the US or if it was actually in Australia. But they did this cultural review trying to figure out what was the culture like, what were the problems, maybe what were some of the good things, what were the problems. Now, what isn't surprising, so it's a report, you can find it online. It was released publicly. It's a really interesting read. I think it's about like 100 pages long or something like that. But I went through and I read it all at the time, so I was very interested. Because it was really peeling back the layers of a Big Four firm and what it's like on the inside. And one of the key things that they found, which won't surprise anybody who knows anything about the Big Four consulting world, was a massive problem with burnout and workload. No crazy headlines there. Everyone would probably expect that. I mean, it doesn't make it right, but no one was surprised by that, I'm sure. The one thing that I thought was really interesting, though, was they had this section where they talked about specifically junior cohorts and burnout. And one of the things that they observed, again, this third-party firm, when they were doing this cultural review into EY, was that at the junior level, think you're graduate, consultant or analyst or whatever, and, the next level up, there were some juniors who were burnt out, completely overworked, juggling so many projects at once. And simultaneously, there were other grads like on the bench doing nothing. And what they outline in the report essentially is that senior leaders would give a task or a project to, a junior resource. That junior resource, that person would do a good job. They've now got a relationship with that senior leader. So next time the senior leader needs something, they go to the same graduate, they go to the same consultant. And that cycle continues and continues, even though that consultant, that graduate, now has too much work. The senior leader goes to them anyway and continues to go to them, even though that graduate has got no more capacity, and there's another graduate on the side sitting there, with a full day, an empty timesheet. And in that report, they didn't mention the Matthew effect, but really what they were essentially outlining was a case study of the Matthew effect. Again, you had consultants who were already busy because they had the initial opportunity with a senior leader. They did a piece of work for them. The senior leader continued to go back to them again and again. They got more and more opportunities. Meanwhile, somebody else sat on the bench waiting for their first opportunity. And I found that fascinating when I read it, because I went, like, it's a real world case study from within the world of Big Four about how this plays out. And if you're a leader in a Big Four firm, you should be mindful of the Matthew effect and whether you're going back to the same juniors because you've gone to them before. Now, you might make the case, but Brock, I'm going to them because they've done a good job. They're capable. They've proven themselves, whereas the other ones aren't as good, let's say. Now, if they truly aren't as good, those other ones, then that's a different story. Makes sense. You want to go to the person who does the best job. But I would challenge you, is it that the others aren't as good, or is it that you haven't worked with them yet? Because if it's that you haven't worked with them yet, you're playing a dangerous game. If they haven't been given the opportunity yet, it's a dangerous game, because your quote-unquote star performer who you keep giving work to, you risk potentially burning them out depending on how much you're giving them. Meanwhile, you have others down here who are being starved of opportunity and dying for it. So there's the burnout factor. It's not an optimal way to spread the workload, right? You've got some who are going above and beyond and really stressing and burning out, and you've got others with capacity. Obviously, it makes sense. You want to level that out so that everybody across the board is doing okay. That's one consideration. The other consideration, though, is that those grads, those consultants that you're neglecting and not giving the opportunity to, because this person over here you've worked with already, you risk the fact that maybe the star of the group is actually in this group that hasn't been given the opportunity yet. It might not be the case, but it might be, and you don't know unless you give them that opportunity. So, and that's something that I think about now, right? The Matthew effect occurs because it's human nature. You work with somebody junior, they do a good job, makes sense. Of course you go back to them, makes sense. But there are problems with it, as we're kind of unpacking now. So to wrap it all up, if you are I think the main takeaway for a junior in the world of the Big Four is to understand that, or to understand what the Matthew effect is and why you want to optimize for getting opportunities early, because you prove yourself early and that gives you the opportunity to get more and more opportunities as time goes on. And that starts by just doing the simple things really well, the annoying tasks really well, because that's all you have to prove yourself on early on. And you have to prove yourself on those simple tasks early on before you get to, play with the big boys and girls and do the harder things. And simultaneously, if you're, you happen to be a leader at a Big Four firm and you're watching this, watch out for the Matthew effect taking hold in your team. Have you got some juniors that are taking all the workload and others aren't taking any? Because you're risking burning out those people who are doing all the work, and you're risking the fact that your star performer might not have been given an opportunity yet, may not have been tested. So that's the Matthew effect. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear if you've seen this play out either in your team or in your own career. If there's anything that you agree with, anything that you disagree with, feel free to let me know. I'll go through all of them. I'll read them all. But otherwise, thanks for watching.